ahead and introduce our speaker, the lovely Felicia Coleman. She is the director of the Florida State University Coastal and Marine Laboratory and is ready to tell you about the curse of too much knowledge. All right, Felicia, thank you.
I have to say I've suffered from this curse in the past. It's very conflict. To making progress with anything. One of the problems that we find with scientists, and I dare say other academics as well, is that we're notoriously poor communicators, and it's really not our fault. We're trained to do this. We're trained to take a topic this narrow and learn every bloody thing there is to know about it. And then if somebody asks us what we do, unfortunately, we tell them in excruciating detail. And you start seeing the eyes rolling back in the head and glazing up a little bit as you continue on without end, seemingly. And what we're suffering from in doing that is a curse of too much knowledge, and what our audience is suffering from is us. And so, what I hope that you get out of the talk are a few tools to use to help speak and write more concisely so that you can not just get your message across, but particularly if you're trying to affect some sort of response or action on the part of the audience, that you make that impression upon them. So we really do need to improve our communication skills, and one of the reasons is, well, I'll talk about a couple of reasons. One is to stem the politicization of and misconduct in science. We're living in a time where science is bashed, misrepresented, and abused, really, in a lot of many ways. We see the economic pressures put on different companies to change the outcomes of science, to have a particular public response. So, for instance, the tobacco industry, we all know, tried to make it very clear to the public that there was no connection whatsoever between smoking and lung cancer. The food and drug industry has released drugs that haven't been completely and effectively tested to find out what the potential backfires could be in terms of people having those drugs, and they're released on an unsuspecting public. So when you're listening to the television and you hear an ad about some drug, the list of consequences of taking it, the things that can happen, are much worse. In some cases, they sound to be much worse than the condition that you needed the drug for in the first place. And the last example is Big Sugar, who paid some scientists at Harvard to make it clear that results other people were finding that sugar was in fact a big problem, for a big contributor to the heart conditions and health of the nation, and effectively put the blame on fats. And that's worked fairly well. A second reason that we need to do this is because I think the young people that we're educating have changed their view of what they want to do. They want the work that they do to matter if it's scientists, clearly in a scientific sense, but also in a societal one. So in other words, they want their life's work to matter in some way and make a contribution. The third reason that we need to do this, did I not get that slide? Okay, the third reason is, as Stephen Schneider said, is because staying out of the fray is not taking the moral high ground, it's passing the buck. And we don't want to continue in that way. We have societal obligations to make science accessible to the people for whom which the outcomes are going to have an effect on them, and whose money really pays for the research that we do. So the state and federal agencies that fund our grants, those people that make that money available need to understand what's going on. And the other thing is, because in trying to educate the public, and we'll talk about what that means in a little while, you have a chance to change people's perceptions, because once you raise their consciousness about a particular topic, it's hard to undo that knowledge, and that's very effective. So these are some of the people who have kind of shown us the way in how to communicate science. People like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who really has excited a whole generation of young people in the beauty and magic of science. Dame Jane Goodall, who was called often a doctor of chimpanzees, is also what's she doing? UN Messenger of Peace has made an incredible impression on the nation. And Sylvia Earle from Deepness, who's a very strong advocate for the health of the ocean. These are people who make very good examples of people who can get their message across very succinctly. Now, this is the way that we typically approach our communication in writing papers or other things, but we develop the research questions in a plan, conduct the research, assess the results, publish the findings, start engaging with people and connecting, and then we think that voila, change happens. But there seems to be something missing. There's this black hole in there right in the middle that really doesn't connect the science with the change that you're trying to affect. And what we're missing is the link between those two things. Stephen Snyder, and I love to quote this guy, he was really a wonderful communicator. Unfortunately, he's been dead for a number of years, but his words live on. The rules we need to follow are: 1, knowing thy audience, 2, know thyself, and know thy stuff. So, the audience is very hard to pin down. There is no such thing as the general public. The general public, if you want to use that term, is made up of all different kinds of people. But we have to speak differently to those different types. So you'll see when we start working on the message box that your audience, we'll start talking about this, but the directions point out that your audience can be legislators, they can be journalists, they can be second graders, and the science that you're talking to them about, or the topic you're talking to them about, doesn't change, but the audience does. So the way that you get that information to that group changes a lot. Some of them you can do at the same time, second graders and politicians, fine, same audience, same substance that you're going to deliver to them. But what they want to know, what the audience wants to know, is why does this stuff matter to me? And the different audiences have different things that they care about. So if you're a manager, for instance, you want to know, what is this going to cost me? What is this knowledge going to cost me? Scientists want to know, is it groundbreaking? Non-governmental organizations want to know if it fits their agenda because they're raising money for their organizations and they have an agenda for that. And if it doesn't fit in there, then it's of no interest. Public, is there a risk to my community? The media, is it news? Do I care about this? And the policymakers, do my constituents care? And is it going to get me reelected? So those are the sorts of things that we're thinking about. And a lot of times that they're saying at the end of your talk, so what? What difference does this make to me? And what they do care about ultimately is, how does whatever you're talking about affect me? So if you're a biogeochemist and you get up and you give a talk about your research in mercury and how important it is to find out the exact concentrations of mercury and how they're transported through the food web, and the audience says, so what? Because what they're really interested in is, you're talking about an organism like a fish that I'm going to eat, and what's the effect to me or my newborn child of eating a fish with these terrifically high concentrations of mercury. So if you just tell them about knowing about concentrations and passage through the food web, that may be unimportant to your audience. One of the things that really needs to happen is you have to try to build trust in the audience. And this is part of knowing thyself, knowing who you are. You have to know your biases and reveal who you are, because because it's important to the audience to trust you if you want them to hear you. And they want to know who you are, not just what you do, but who you are as a person. What do you care about, and what is it that you care about in your research? Why does it matter to you? Make it matter to me. Let me know why I should care. But you have to know yourself to be able to do that. The last thing that we talk about is knowing your stuff. So what we're going to try to do is move from this method where there's a disconnect. We still are using this to write papers in a sense, but there's no reason why you can't. Maybe I shouldn't be walking around. Shouldn't have that tea. And what we want to do is kind of turn it on its head so that you're looking at it in a different way. So instead of this sort of system, you can take this box to figure out, to organize a paper, organize a talk. It's wonderful if you've just written something really controversial and all of a sudden you're bombarded by journalists who want an answer. And if you have this bloody thing in front of you, when they're talking to you, you never forget what needs to be said that they haven't asked you. So, let's go through an example. That'll be the easiest way to do it. So this is taken from a paper by Patz et al. In 2005, Impact of Regional Climate Change on Human Health. And what the issue was that climate change is triggering disease epidemics. And the problem is there's a large geographic difference in disease burdens due to global warming. Those most at risk are the least responsible for causing the problems we've all heard about. Small islands in the Pacific that are suffering the consequences of climate change and disappearing. And herein lies the global ethical issue. And the solution, the U.S. should join the rest of the world in confronting climate change. Personally, these people said, I've made easy choices as a first step. And the benefits, it reduces the adverse health effects with the co-benefit of improving air quality, take care of current populations without compromising the health of future generations. So if you go through this, every time this may be even before you write your paper, and you can use it as an organizational technique. You definitely can use it when you're talking to journalists because you can get nervous and you can identify a thing that they haven't asked you about, and you say, but, so let's talk about the solutions. And then that gives you that opportunity to do so in a concise manner. How do you want to get that message across? What you don't want to do is this way. You don't want to use caveats and a lot of jargon. For one reason, the jargons in different fields are quite different. So if I'm talking about fish migrations, I'm seeing a school of fish doing something cool, of course. But if I'm talking to a physical oceanographer, it's a particle in his model. It has no competency to do anything without water flow, which is not always the case. So we're talking about the same thing, but we're thinking about it in an entirely different way. Another example would be, I said another example too quickly. Another example would be something like productivity. So if you're talking to a biologist, productivity means biological production. It means biomass. But if you're talking to somebody that owns a factory, then productivity is an output of some product that you have some economic skin in the game with, and so you care about that. But it's totally different thing. So this actually points to a sort of different area, and that is the importance of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary work. Because you take that physical oceanographer and you take that biologist and you throw them together and they start learning each other's notes and the music and the rhythm and these things, and they start making beautiful products together because now they understand each other and they've seen how their work can feed off of each other. And in fact, Farouk and I were just something like that, where you get the engineers together with the biologists who are trying to solve problems, and that electrical, for instance. I'm sure will be some opportunities for collaboration, and we'll have to learn how each other speak. Let's see. Oh, so why do you not do this? Because I know this is a hard thing to accept. It's about 0.1% of the people on the earth, are scientists. So there's 99%, that's everyone else. So even the scientists don't understand each other, so this goes way down, which makes this number go even further up. So nobody knows what the hell you're doing. Really, your mother, if my mother ever read a paper on bird, I don't think so, she'd probably look at it and say, nice, honey. But this is the truth. So how do you make that 99% care about what you're talking about? So I like to call it adding the verbal blame. You add that substance into a talk or a presentation or whatever it is that makes it a little more interesting. And there's no reason why you can't do that to some extent. It's in scientific writing. It doesn't have to all be dense. It can be interesting and keep it moving so people want to read it. People like Christopher Joyce, who's an NPR reporter, talked about being in Antarctica and watching the ice floes break up. Antarctic ice shelves crumble off the continent like the edges of an overcooked pie crust. Just love that. Prince Charles, rainforests are the lungs of the planet. And Dan Pauly, who's a fisheries guru, said we're fishing for bait and headed for jellyfish. So there just add some differences in the way that they talk that grabs your attention and keeps you interested. So I think those basically are the tools that I think you will find to be very useful to hone your message for a seminar or an interview or whatever it is, your general writing. And you can also do it today when you come up with your 2-minute or 30-second presentation that you've taken this immense knowledge that you have and condensed it down into this, so even Aunt Edna at Thanksgiving dinner can understand it. So, who wants to go first? We'll do this later, but that's it, and thank you.